Anna Marie Mullin, was born April 6, 1960, and sadly had a traumatic childhood. She was described as intelligent, loyal, and very generous. In a family of 8 siblings, she took on the role of protector and caretaker for her brothers and sisters. She did her best to make sure that they never went hungry and were taken care of. One of her sisters would later note that Anna Marie was the only reason she was still alive. She and her siblings were eventually put into the foster care system and were separated and sent to live with family members, with Anna Marie going to live with her aunt's family in Ashland, Massachusetts. There, she attended Ashland High School and excelled in basketball for 3 years. She enjoyed art, the outdoors, and was always camping and hiking with her family and friends. After high school, Anna Marie joined the Air Force, where she breezed through basic training, but struggled once she had to make the transition to job school. While in job training, after basic training, she was offered the choice to change jobs or be honorably discharged, and she chose the honorable discharge. She then moved to Florida after leaving the Air Force rather than moving back to Massachusetts. She lived in Wilton Manors, Florida for the next 3 years, where she worked as a telephone operator. For a few years, she had problems with alcohol, and her sister believes it was her attempt to forget the traumas of her childhood. She was a regular at the Caboose Bar, now called the Pub in Wilton Manors, and everyone knew her and she knew everyone. So on November 6, 1982, while at the Caboose Bar, 22-year-old Anna Marie began conversing with a man that was a stranger to the bar. Anna Marie was known for being extremely friendly and outgoing, so it seemed natural for her to take a seat next to the stranger and start a conversation with him. The man was the only person in the bar that night that was not a regular patron. She was likely pleased to find someone so generous, as she had recently lost her job and had only $1 in her pocket that evening. At 2:30 a.m., the unidentified man appeared concerned about her and offered to drive Anna Marie home. She said goodbye to the remaining customers and left with the unidentified man. Just a few hours later, and less than a mile away, members of the St. Clement's Catholic Church began arriving for Mass and found her deceased body on the front steps of the church. She had been sexually and physically assaulted and killed by choking. According to a story in the Florida Sun-Sentinel, 2 employees at the bar agreed to undergo hypnosis to provide police with details of the night, and a sketch of the man was created. Under hypnosis, the employees described the man as Caucasian, in his early 30s, about 5 feet 11 inches tall, weighing approximately 200 pounds, with dark brown hair and brown eyes. One of the employees reportedly said that the man's name was Tony, spelled with an I, but was unable to remember a last name. They recalled playing pool with the man and that he had used a unique assembly style he referred to as the New Jersey rack. An envelope that the suspect had laid on the bar had a return address in Northwest Pompano Beach and a name starting with a T. Pompano Beach is about 6 miles from the bar. According to Catch My Killer podcast, a man named Tom that goes by Tommy, Tomi, messaged her sister Fran Cubes on Facebook in the recent years and said that he was at the bar with Anna Marie the night she was killed. When she called him, he was crying and saying that he would never hurt anyone and he didn't do it. Law enforcement told her sister that they had a lot of DNA samples available to test when technology advanced, but according to her family, the evidence from her has been misplaced, lost, or thrown out by police. According to her sister, years ago, the coroner stated there was a microscope slide with the suspect's biological fluid on it that has never been sent out for testing for unknown reasons. Cold case investigators have been hindered by the fact that valuable evidence was not retained, but there is still a slim chance that the case can be solved if the right person comes forward and speaks to detectives. Also on the podcast Catch My Killer, Anna Marie's sister describes the frustrations she's had with authorities in trying to get her sister's case investigated. Shockingly, Anna Marie allegedly isn't even listed as an official cold case homicide victim. The Broward County Sheriff's Department is responsible for investigating homicide cases of Wilton Manors, Florida, and as of today, this case remains unsolved. Daniel Jess Goldman was born March 29, 1948, and went by Danny and was described as smart, focused, and well-mannered. His parents, Aaron and Sally Goldman, were successful, wealthy, and well-known in Surfside, Florida, where they lived. Aaron was a prominent contractor and builder, and Sally was an interior designer. At the age of 17, he was a senior at Miami Beach High School in Florida and lived in the 1100 block of 88th Street in Surfside. He enjoyed spending time with his girlfriend, Sharon Lloyd, and working on electronics. On March 28, 1966, the day before his 18th birthday, a man entered their home through an unlocked patio door in the early morning hours and woke his parents, Aaron and Sally. He addressed them by their first names and demanded $10,000 in cash. $10,000 at the time would be equivalent to almost $70,000 today. They told him they didn't have the money in the house and offered to write him a check. The man bound their wrists behind their backs with Venetian blind cord, sticking a pair of scissors and a knife in the knots so they would cut themselves if they struggled, and covered their mouths with tape. He began searching the home for cash before waking up Danny. He then told Danny's parents that he would call them about 6 or 7 that night with instructions and demanded a ransom of $25,000 and said if it wasn't paid by 6 a.m. the next morning, the price would double. He then threatened to kill Danny if his demands weren't met. He then forced Danny to get dressed, bound his wrist, and drove away with him in Danny's own white Rambler sedan. Aaron was able to quickly get up and watch them drive away. He began screaming for help, alarming the neighbors. One neighbor, an 18-year-old named Phil, ran over and untied the couple before running back home to have his parents call police. Strangely, the kidnapper never called the Goldmans that evening with any instructions. Aaron stated he didn't get a good look at the abductor in the dark, but had a feeling he knew him. He described the man as Caucasian, with gray hair, about 5'8" to 5'11", 180 to 200 pounds, wearing dark-colored clothing, a baseball cap, and eyeglasses with silver metal rims. The man spoke with a Midwestern accent and was in his 50s. A few hours later, Danny's car was found abandoned in a parking lot on Harding Avenue. One piece of physical evidence left behind at the home was a fingertip from a surgical glove. The kidnapper apparently tore or cut his glove while tying up Danny and his parents. Authorities determined the glove was a Sterling brand designed exclusively for medical use. It's manufactured and distributed exclusively in Canada and can't be purchased in the United States. The police sent a letter about the glove to the Canadian Medical Association with a description of the abductor, appealing for information. The letter was published in Canadian medical journals, but nothing came of it. It wouldn't be until 46 years later that a team of volunteer investigators would discover incredible information suggesting that Danny's abduction may have had connections to the mafia under Santo Trafficante, a corrupt sheriff's department, and even Danny's own girlfriend's father. To this day, Danny has never been found dead or alive. Although once the focus of national attention, by 2012, official records had long listed the case as administratively closed, and no one was even pretending to be investigating it. It was also determined that Danny was not even listed in any databases as a missing person. Sadly, his father passed away in 2010 and his mother in 2012. Also in 2012, at least 4 local men, led by attorney and former mayor of Surfside, Paul Novak, who was a child in 1966 and lived near the Goldman home, began investigating the case. 3 of the men had known Danny personally, and they all wanted justice for him. Details never previously known were found and analyzed. Evidence allegedly linked several men to the kidnapping: Jimmy Hoffa, Meyer Lansky, Santo Trafficante, Joe Chicken Cacciatore, and Frank Sturgis, later known as Watergate Burglar. Evidence also linked police and court officials, banks controlled by organized crime, and other criminals. Danny's father, Aaron, was an original member of the board of directors at 5 Points Bank and complained to federal agents about unsecured loans being fostered by the bank's new officers. The loans included cash and assets going to associates of Hoffa, Lansky, and Trafficante, as well as friends of high-ranking government officials. On Thursday, March 24, 1966, the investigation into the bank was presented to a federal grand jury, and by Monday morning, Danny was gone. 3 months after his abduction, 19 directors and officers at the bank were indicted for federal fraud. According to Novak's theory, the Goldmans had hidden $10,000 in cash in their house and planned to use the money to send Danny out of the country so he wouldn't have to register for the draft on his 18th birthday. Cacciatore heard about this from another criminal, Charles Lloyd, whose daughter was Danny's girlfriend. This would explain how the kidnapper knew about the money in the Goldman house. However, Cacciatore was never questioned by the police about Danny's disappearance. Novak believes some members of the Miami-Dade Police Department did know he was involved, as the department was notoriously corrupt in the 60s. 7 months after Danny's abduction, 5 of its officers were indicted on burglary and larceny charges, including Sergeant David Hellman, who was actually the officer assigned to investigate Danny's case. However, the charges against the 5 officers were ultimately dismissed on a technicality. Hellman would resign from the force and become a private investigator and bail bondsman. In 1970, he was called to testify against another Miami-Dade police officer in a corruption trial, but he refused, pleading the Fifth. In 1986, 20 years after Danny's abduction, a woman in a Miami bar claimed she'd been his girlfriend and said she knew what happened and that he was dead. The woman stated that after Danny was taken from his home, he was taken to another location, and there he recognized one of his kidnappers. The abductors panicked, killed him, and dumped his parts in the Florida Gulf Stream. The bartender called the police, but by the time authorities arrived, the woman was gone. She has never been identified, but Danny's girlfriend still lives in the area and says she was not the woman in the bar in Miami and knows nothing about his abduction or his ultimate fate. The volunteer group that began their own investigation starting in 2012 determined that George DeFias kidnapped Danny and Cacciatore participated in the crime. Both men were notorious burglars. They were both affiliated with the Trafficani organization, and DeFias was also an informant, which kept him out of prison. His fingerprint was left on the Goldman sliding glass door, and Cacciatore lived only 2 blocks from where Danny's car was abandoned. According to documented information provided by criminal associates of those involved, Danny's body was taken to Molly Lake Marina in North Miami Beach, put onto Wally Jefferson's boat, the Ponderosa, taken out through the Haulover Inlet to the Gulf Stream, and his parts thrown overboard. Wally Jefferson was a Miami police motorman. Danny's girlfriend at the time he was kidnapped, Sharon, later married Wally Jefferson just a few years before he died of liver failure related to alcoholism. She has refused to share her knowledge of the case with the volunteers investigating the case. George DeFias was allegedly involved in the homicides of Danny and several others, and despite this, along with his involvement with narcotics, counterfeit cash, theft, and other crimes, he never went to prison and later died of natural causes in Miami. No one has ever been arrested, and as of today, this case remains unsolved. Cieha Annette Taylor was born November 16, 1991, and lived in Dade City, Florida. She was described as unique, eccentric, and goofy with a lot of personality. On February 6, 2020, about 7 p.m., a concerned citizen reported that a car was strangely abandoned on railroad tracks at East Trapnell Road, just west of Jap Tucker Road in Plant City, Florida. The driver's door was open, the engine was running, a purse and keys were left inside, and a cell phone was found lying on the ground nearby. When local police arrived, they turned the car off, put the cell phone back inside alongside the purse that contained an ID and debit card, and locked the car after moving it alongside the road. They apparently didn't run the tag or attempt to notify the owner. Turns out, the car belonged to 28-year-old Cieha. Over the next few days, the black Toyota Solara remained next to the tracks where law enforcement left it. During this time, from February 6th to February 9th, family began calling Cieha's phone multiple times and reaching out to friends trying to see who had seen her or spoken to her, not knowing her car was found abandoned. During the investigation, it was determined that Cieha was last seen at 4 p.m. on Friday, February 6th, just 3 hours prior to her car being reported abandoned. According to her boyfriend, his friend and friend's father, she dropped her boyfriend off at 4 p.m. where he was staying with a friend on Cowart Road, just a mile from where her car was found abandoned. After dropping her boyfriend off, she was supposed to drive to her friend's home in Lakeland, Florida and stay there, which is why her boyfriend said he wasn't concerned. It wasn't until the boyfriend's mother came to drop off clothes to him that she spotted the car and told him about it. He said it was odd because she was supposed to be in Lakeland. They called the Lakeland friend, who told them that Cieha never arrived. It was then that Cieha's mother was notified of her disappearance and a missing persons report filed 4 whole days after her last sighting. An investigation was started by the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office, and a search was started by Cieha's family and Homeland Security in the area. However, nothing was found during any initial searches, despite the use of canines and helicopters. Her friend in Lakeland stated that she briefly spoke to Cieha that afternoon and noted that she did sound funny on the phone. It cannot be confirmed if this call took place before or after dropping the boyfriend off. Her boyfriend has been questioned several times by law enforcement along with the family he was staying with. The house she supposedly dropped him off at has also been searched by law enforcement and canines. Many people find it strange that her car sat for several days just blocks from where her boyfriend was staying and he didn't report it. Her family reported that he was not a good boyfriend at all, and they believe she met with foul play at his hands. He was described as using her insecurities against her and using racial slurs against her for being biracial and him being white. Her family allegedly stated that when they went through Cieha's phone, the final text was to her boyfriend asking, "So you're going to send your white supremacist friends after me?" 3 weeks later, Cieha's shoes were found on a drainage pipe near the road by a light pole near where her car was abandoned, just outside Plant City. They were neatly placed next to her missing persons flyer, but also where her family had carried out a recent vigil. Family, friends, and police officers searched this area prior, and the shoes were not there, and it was obvious they were placed there with the missing flyer. Strangely and possibly unrelated, 23-year-old Veronica Reyes Diaz was last seen in nearby Dover, Florida, before vanishing 3 weeks before Cieha disappeared. Both women look eerily similar. However, law enforcement doesn't believe the cases are related. This is still an open and active investigation, and her family begs for answers, but as of today, this case remains unsolved. Martha Jean Lambert was born March 26, 1973, to Howard and Margaret Lambert. At the age of 12, she was a 7th grader at Ketterlingus Junior High School and living on Cary Lynn Road in St. Augustine, Florida. She was described as a shy, friendly, happy, and trusting girl that just wanted to be liked. Her family was described as dysfunctional and troubled, and also described as odd by those who knew them. Neighbors said her father was an alcoholic, and there was a lot of loud fighting at their home. They also described Martha as always dirty and never had clean clothes to wear. The Lambert children had been in foster care at least once before due to alleged child abuse, and her 2 older brothers, 14-year-old David and oldest brother Raymond, had previously run away. A neighbor said it wasn't unusual to hear Howard Lambert yelling inside the trailer, adding there was lots of anger in that family. On November 27, 1985, Martha was looking forward to spending Thanksgiving the next day at her grandmother's house. Sadly, she would never make it. She disappeared the night before Thanksgiving, and there have been several different versions given by her family as to what actually occurred. Reports say that she went to a friend's home after school that day, returning home about 7:30 p.m. and had dinner with her brother David. Initially, David said that she told him she was going out, but refused to tell him where she was going. He said the last time that he saw her, she was walking down the street towards Little Champ, a store on State Road 207. He then said the last time he saw her, she was getting into a black car. Her mother said that Martha was with her at a neighbor's home, and she said she was going to run home and would be back in 5 minutes. When she didn't return, she went looking for her, and upon arriving home, her youngest son David was walking out of the trailer laughing, though he would not tell her why he was laughing. Margaret has since stated that this has always bothered her. Martha was reported missing at 3 a.m. on November 28th when no one could find her. Authorities started to search for Martha immediately following her disappearance in areas along State Road 207 and near Carey Lynn Road, and they questioned everyone in the area. Some neighbors stated that they had seen Martha walking west on Carey Lynn Road later that night. Others also reported that they had seen a suspicious green van being driven in the area. It was the only vehicle that was not native to the area. Her mother believed that Martha was abducted outside of their mobile home that evening while wearing her two-piece bathing suit or a summer dress by the strange green van that was seen in the area. It was apparently spotted soon after Martha left, but nothing was found and the case started to turn cold. However, authorities long suspected her 14-year-old brother David Allen Lambert knew more about his sister's disappearance than he had disclosed. 15 years later, after being arrested in 2000 for passing a bad check, he told police he was responsible for his sister's death and had buried her at a coquine mine on Holmes Boulevard, known locally as the Pits. However, investigators didn't recover a body, and he wasn't charged at the time because investigators couldn't find Martha's body or any other evidence to support his statement. David's confession wasn't publicized until 2009, and it was then that his mother told the media she didn't believe it. She stated David often makes up stories to get attention, and she thinks others were responsible for Martha's disappearance. Shortly after Margaret voiced her opinion to the press, David retracted his previous statements. In media interviews, he stated the police wanted to close Martha's case, and he only told them what they wanted to hear. He said he is mentally incompetent, has long-standing emotional problems, and has no idea what actually happened to Martha. In 2009, he again confessed to killing Martha. After a 20-hour interview and interrogation, he and the detective sat his mother down and had to convince her that he was telling the truth. He stated that on November 27, 1985, he and Martha left home because their parents got into a fight over a burned turkey. They went to a Little Champ's convenience store and she bought $4 in candy with a $20 bill David had. They then went to the old abandoned Florida Memorial College near their home. Apparently, they got into an argument because she wouldn't give him the change from the $20. He then stated that she hit him, and he then pushed her so hard that she fell onto the ground and her head landed on a rusted and jagged piece of metal. He claimed he called out for help, hoping someone would come and help her, and that no one apparently heard him. David was scared of what his parents would do to him if they discovered what he had done to Martha, so by using the broken piece of a road sign, he dug a 3-foot makeshift grave and placed her there. He said he then went home and got cleaned up. He said he was a scared 14-year-old. Investigators were unable to find Martha's body on the land where Florida Memorial College once was. 2 years prior to David's second confession, the area was bulldozed due to criminal activity and completely rebuilt, decreasing the odds even more of ever finding her. Cadaver dogs taken to the site where David said his sister was buried also showed a change in behavior, although an excavation of the area turned up nothing of interest. Police believed his story, but no charges were filed against him because he was a minor at the time of the incident and the statute of limitations for manslaughter had expired and they considered the case closed. During the recorded conversation of David and the detective sitting his mother down to let him confess the details to her, some people say that there are a few red flags, as if it is a false or coerced confession. The interrogation with David reportedly lasted 20 hours, and before his mother was sat down to be told the story, detectives took David out of the room for a period of time and spoke to him. Also, it is hard to believe that he dug a 3-foot hole with a piece of a broken sign. At the time of her disappearance in 1985, her father was 74 years old and her mother was 33. Her disappearance tore the family apart as the fighting increased between her parents and her father's drinking got worse. Since she has been missing, her father has died, her mother has moved to Illinois and remarried and is now Margaret Pichon. Her oldest brother Raymond now goes by the name Cynthia Jean Lambert. It is unclear where he was when Martha went missing, but one report says he may have been at church. Martha's body has not been located, and as of today, this case remains unsolved. Michelle Loree Parker was born November 20th, 1978. She graduated from Winter Park High School in Winter Park, Florida, and was described as a devoted mother and hard worker. In 2011, at the age of 33, she was a mother of an 11-year-old son and 3-year-old twins and lived in Orlando, Florida. She worked as a bartender, hairdresser, and also ran a home tanning business. On November 17, 2011, she dropped her twins off at the home of their father, her ex-fiancé, Dale Smith Jr., at Carter Glen Condominiums off Goldenrod Road near the Orlando airport at 2:30 p.m. Security cameras filmed her arriving at the condo and then driving away in her black 2007 Hummer at 3:18 p.m. At 4:26 that day, Michelle's brother sent her a text message asking where she was, and she replied Waterford. Waterford Lakes is a neighborhood in Orlando, and her brother said she normally sent long text messages, and it was unusual of her to reply with just one word. At 6:50 p.m., her 11-year-old son called her sister, concerned because his mother hadn't arrived home. She also didn't show up for her shift as a bartender at the now-closed Jesse Black Saloon that night. At 8 p.m., her cell phone pinged in the area of Oak Ridge Road near Belle Isle, more than 7 miles where she was last seen, and that's where the phone turned off. The next day, her Hummer was located at Walden Palms Apartments in the 4700 block of Walden Circle in Orlando with its decals removed from the windows. 3 weeks after her disappearance, police found her cell phone in a lake near the Nila Bridge in Belle Isle. Just hours before she disappeared, an episode of the television show The People's Court aired that was filmed months earlier in June 2011. Michelle and Smith appeared in the episode over a dispute involving a $5,000 engagement ring. Michelle had thrown the ring at him during an argument at a hotel, and it fell 9 stories and was lost in the hotel atrium. During the taping, she said her relationship with Smith had been troubled and he could become vindictive and abusive, particularly after he had been drinking. The judge ordered the two to split the cost of the ring. Smith is described as being hot-tempered, and even on his Facebook page, he lists that he studied death, destruction, terror, and mayhem in the U.S. Marine Corps. Records show that he also has a criminal record, having pleaded guilty to felony battery in 1997 and has been arrested several other times. He was also court-martialed several times while a member of the U.S. Marines and found guilty of drugs and domestic battery charges. After her disappearance, Florida's Department of Children and Families filed a petition to remove their children from Smith's custody because of his history of violent behavior towards women. At an emergency hearing on November 30th, the judge ruled there was no cause to grant the DCF's petition, and the twins remained with him. He refused to take a polygraph in Michelle's case and hired an attorney. Her family strongly believed Smith was involved in her death, and in March 2013, they filed a wrongful death suit against him, alleging Michelle died on the day she vanished as a direct and proximate result of his negligence. During his deposition, his attorney advised him to plead the fifth multiple times, including when asked if he knew what happened to Michelle. Authorities have named him as the prime and only suspect in her case, and he maintains his innocence and moved to Tennessee with the twins. Her family has been begging for answers and has suffered for the past 11 years. As of today, this case remains unsolved.